Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How are you today? This is Dr. A. I was about to say Antonio, so I might as well will. It's Antonio. And I'm right here. I'm sitting in my room. And guys, I have an eye opening experience. I've been knowing this for years. I've had to put two and two together. Nobody would listen to me. So now I'm going to do it this way. And I'm telling you, I want to talk to you about this guy who is running for office. He has a bad attitude. He has a quick temper. He doesn't play around. He'll tell you to shut up in a minute. He can call you crazy. He'll insult you. He'll call you all sorts of names. And he's want to be your president. He's a racist dog, man. He's racist, doesn't care about black folks, never did, never will. And he's running for your vote. Don't vote for this guy. This guy's nuts, man. I'm telling you. He's not good for you. He won't even do nothing to even let you lift a finger for him. And he's using you. He's used a lot of black folks. He used you like a coon. Man, this guy right here, I'm talking about, what I'm going to show you on a number of videos, is not good for this country. He divided this country. He's corrupting this country. He made his wealth in this country. He's made over millions. Matter of fact, I got his income tax paperwork. That man made millions. And I'm not talking about small M's. I'm talking about big M's. And I'm telling you, he can care less about you. You'll never go to his neighborhood. You'll never live in his neighborhood. You'll never get anywhere near him. The man got Secret Service all around him, and he look down on you like nothing. Well, guys, who I'm talking about? Who you think I'm talking about? No, man, no. I'm not talking about Trump. I'm not talking about Trump. I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about Biden. Biden, in my opinion, Biden. Because the fur fits, wear it. The man is racist as a hound dog on crack because of his years. The man can care less about black folks. The man can care less about other races. That man been in politics for 47 years and never had a real heart for African Americans or people of other people minorities. The man only care about himself. That man already gave us hell since the 70s, and you love him. That man has been a friend to the Ku Klux Klan. He's been a friend to racist politicians back in the early 70s. The man had been incorporated with these guys. The Democratic Party was a party of racism, and I don't know why so many people are so connected to a racist party. The man, I just looked on a note, just found out that the chair of the Democratic Party back in the 70s considered black folks, and I'm talking about the chair of a Democratic Party, considers inferior. Why would you want to bow down and go to a party that's been historically racist? It's the party of the Confederate States of America. It is the party of the Ku Klux Klan. It is the party that have lynched hundreds of thousands of African Americans during the 1920s. It is the party that has been responsible for the genocide of plantation across the southern United States of America, or I may say concentration camps. Why support a party like that? But you want to vote for Biden, so I'm going to stick to Biden, guys. I'm going to stick to Biden, guys, and hopefully this will open your eyes. I hope this will open your eyes. Guys, I'm really disappointed at a number of people who support this man. I'm really disappointed of my intellectual brothers and sisters who got education, who got intellects, and smart as a whip, and don't know or don't even understand or see a snake when they see one right in front of the face. So guys, this coon has been promoting segregation since the 70s. He had promoted a crime bill back in 1993 that put thousands and hundreds of thousands of African Americans, you may not remember because you try to forget, in prison. But I'm here to tell you, Black Lives Matter, and everybody else, I'm here to tell you that the crime bill is still in effect. Did you know that? You think it's gone when Obama? Do you think that reform was gone? Come on, guys. I wore the blue uniform for a little while. I worked in corrections for a while. Guys, we got more blacks in prison than whites, especially the one I've been around, federal and state. And you here to tell me this guy is a reformer? No, 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 no. Trump has given nonviolent African Americans an opportunity for freedom, thousands of him, and he done it quick in 4 years. This joker been around for 47 years and done nothing but put more black people, more black families in prison than you can shake a stick, the new plantation. And also, he has racial comments. Racial comments. You talk about Trump making racial comments? Please. This man been making racial comments since his time in political office, and heaven forbid, I'm quite sure he said a few choice words in private. So guys, I'm going to stop it right here. You watch the video, you judge, you decide.
We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
He's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains. Gentlemen and ladies of the Senate.
One chapter receiving fresh scrutiny comes from his earliest years in the Senate, when he strongly opposed mandatory school busing. It was designed to achieve integration and a more equitable education. It was the mid-1970s. Biden favored desegregation, but not through busing. What's less known is how he followed the lead of some of the Senate's most fervent segregationists. In a series of never-before-published letters reviewed by CNN, the strength of Biden's opposition to busing comes into sharper focus. On March 25, 1977, Biden wrote, "My bill strikes at the heart of the injustice of court-ordered busing. It prohibits the federal courts from disrupting our educational system." Biden sought and received support from Mississippi Senator James Eastland, the Democratic chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and a leading symbol of Southern resistance to desegregation. He frequently spoke of blacks as, quote, an inferior race. On June 30th, 1977, Biden wrote, "Dear Mr. Chairman, I want you to know that I very much appreciate your help during this week's committee meeting in attempting to bring my anti-busing legislation to a vote." Then in 1978, Biden again asked Eastland to put his anti-busing bill before the full Senate, writing, "Your participation in floor debate would be welcome."
I had spent years writing what became known as the Biden crime bill. The Biden crime bill.
The Biden crime bill.
Democrats right now, especially African Americans, have really looked back on the 1994 crime bill not very fondly. Hillary Clinton herself has come out against it, even though her husband signed it into law. Well, the author of that crime bill was Joe Biden.
The Biden crime bill. The Biden crime bill.
Biden's 1994 crime bill, while implementing sweeping gun control, also helped fuel mass incarceration with financial incentives to keep people behind bars.
The Biden crime bill. The Biden crime bill.
The Biden crime bill is before us. Calls for the death penalty for 51 offenses. A wag in the newspaper recently wrote that something to the effect that Biden has made it a death penalty offense for everything but jaywalking.
The Biden crime bill. Biden crime bill.
The Biden-Hatch crime bill, as it becomes law, God willing, I hope that we will have ended once and for all this notion that is a hangover from the 60s, that somehow Democrats are weak on crime and Democratic presidents are weak on crime and Republicans are tough on crime. The truth is, every major crime bill since 1976 that's come out of this Congress, every minor crime bill has had the name of the Democratic senator from the state of Delaware, Joe Biden, on that bill. I like the idea they keep in jail longer. I'm the guy that wrote the bill requiring federal judges to keep people in jail 100% of the time for which they're sentenced, and in notable exceptions, only 85%. So I'm all for tougher enforcement.
We wrote the statute saying burning the flag in and of itself is a crime, period. Boom.
We changed the law so that if you are arrested and you are a drug dealer, under our forfeiture statutes, you can, the government can, take everything you own, everything from your car to your house, your bank account, not merely what they confiscate in terms of the dollars from the transaction that you just got caught engaging in. They can take everything. We have laws in the last several years where we don't allow judges discretion to sentence people. Flat time sentencing. You get caught, you go to jail. We've gone from there all the way up to saying, under the leadership of Senator Thurmond, and I'd like to suggest that I take some small credit for it myself as well, and others, the presiding officer, that there is now a death penalty. And we passed it a couple years ago. If you are a major drug dealer involved in the trafficking of drugs and murder results in your activities, you go to death. And a number of other severe penalties.
Back when Bill Clinton's crime bill passed, Joe Biden was such an outspoken supporter, he said, quote, "I'd like to be running and have someone use the crime bill against me."
We must take back the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask, what made them do this? They must be taken off the street. That's number one. There's a consensus on that. Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society. And the truth is, we don't very well know how to rehabilitate them at that point. That's the sad truth. I'm the guy that said, rehabilitation, when it occurs, we don't understand it and notice it.
Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, "I'm ashamed that I voted for the '94 crime bill." You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. And in fact, I drafted the bill.
Got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black. Kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids, black kids, Asian kids. I've had a great relationship. In Delaware, the largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking. I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Joe, you want to administer the oath?
Am I doing this again? My memory is not as good as Justice Roberts.
I want to be clear. I'm not going nuts.
We keep talking about this thing as being north versus south. That's not the issue. It is rural versus urban. And most of the busing that's taken place to date has taken place in rural areas, whether it's be administratively ordered or court ordered. Now we're moving into applying the same standards to urban areas. And it is a standard that doesn't make sense. It doesn't apply. It doesn't hold. We're moving from trying to, in urban areas, we've had integrated facilities but segregated neighborhoods. And in rural areas, we've traditionally had integrated neighborhoods but segregated facilities. And they've applied the same standard and the same test. So this north-south thing is not really the issue. As Professor Nathan Glazer at Harvard has indicated, as Dr. Armour of the RAND Corporation, as James Coleman, as I just held 3 days of hearing, two days of hearings in the Judiciary Committee on another bill I have, beyond this that deals with busing. And there is uniform opinion of those who testified that it is not a north-south, it's an urban-rural question, a distinction.
But no matter what your intent, there are going to be those who say it's a segregated thing, it's a question of race, and that you have set back the movement of desegregation of schools. How would you answer that?
The way I answer that is I predict that the young black leadership of America will overwhelmingly decide with me. I predict that in 1980 and 84, my position will be totally vindicated by the sociologists and by the civil rights advocates. You know, I come from that side of the track. That's where I'm from. I was a defense lawyer. I handled civil rights cases. I sat in on Route 40. I mean, I'm not from the other side of this. And I happen to think that the one way to ensure that you set the civil rights movement in America further back is to continue to push busing, because it's a bankrupt policy. And that's why I think I'll be vindicated. I don't include myself with pro or anti-busing forces. I think the only group that can determine whether or not a constitutional violation exists.
Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No,
do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision. So that's where the federal
government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality.
Former Vice President Joe Biden, he's run for president twice before, unsuccessfully. He's never before been the frontrunner. Now that he is towering over all the other declared Democratic candidates, his almost 5 decades in public life are getting some real scrutiny. On top of that list, his record on civil rights during his younger days as a U.S. Senator. CNN's Jeff Zeleny has exclusively obtained some letters written by Biden himself.
Everybody asks me, what kind of Democrat? I'm an Obama-Biden Democrat, man.
After 8 years alongside President Obama, Joe Biden is coming back as a solo act.
I'm ready to go.
With his long record facing a new look under the spotlight of the 2020 campaign.
Gentlemen and ladies of the Senate.
One chapter receiving fresh scrutiny comes from his earliest years in the Senate, when he strongly opposed mandatory school busing. It was designed to achieve integration and a more equitable education. It was the mid-1970s. Biden favored desegregation, but not through busing. What's less known is how he followed the lead of some of the Senate's most fervent segregationists. In a series of never-before-published letters reviewed by CNN, the strength of Biden's opposition to busing comes into sharper focus. On March 25, 1977, Biden wrote, "My bill strikes at the heart of the injustice of court-ordered busing. It prohibits the federal courts from disrupting our educational system." Biden sought and received support from Mississippi Senator James Eastland, the Democratic chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and a leading symbol of Southern resistance to desegregation. He frequently spoke of blacks as, quote, an inferior race. Biden reflected on that era earlier this year.
They're a bunch of racists. There was, James O. Eastland, Mississippi, Strom Thurmond, and so on. There were 9 guys who were in the caucus that were, I ran against in the civil rights movement.
But he did not say that Eastland and others were partners on several of Biden's anti-busing bills. On June 30th, 1977, Biden wrote, "Dear Mr. Chairman, I want you to know that I very much appreciate your help during this week's committee meeting in attempting to bring my anti-busing legislation to a vote." Then in 1978, Biden again asked Eastland to put his anti-busing bill before the full Senate, writing, "Your participation in floor debate would be welcomed." 4 decades later, after building a strong civil rights record, Biden stands by his opposition to busing, arguing it did not address institutional racism. Most busing programs in America were later abandoned, after bringing more hardship than equal opportunity to all students. A Biden spokesman telling CNN, "Joe Biden is today, and has been for more than 40 years in public life, one of the strongest and most powerful voices for civil rights in America." Ronnie Dunn is a professor at Cleveland State University who co-wrote the book Boycotts, Busing, and Beyond. He says Biden's opposition to busing is not disqualifying, but warrants explanation.
Those letters I find somewhat surprising given Senator Biden's or Vice President Biden's current position and potential candidacy for the presidency and his position as a liberal. Those are issues that he's obviously going to have to answer for.
You said surprising. Surprising in what way?
Well, the fact that he would solicit the support of staunch segregationists, James Eastland as well as Jesse Helms, introducing legislation as opposing busing at that time.
So the question facing Biden is how he reconciles nearly a half century in public life with today's Democratic Party. Of course, Jake, one of his biggest pieces of experience is that experience and long record. That also is one of his biggest challenges.
If I'm a felon just coming home from a 20-year sentence because of Joe Biden and that bullshit bill that him and Hillary put forth.
Another thing about how perspectives change over time. Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, I'm ashamed that I voted for the 94 crime bill. You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. In fact, I drafted the bill, as you remember.
I know that.
Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now, not out of a liberal instinct for love, brother, and humanity, although I think that's a good instinct, but for simple, pragmatic reasons. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society.
Mass incarceration has put hundreds of thousands behind bars for minor offenses. Joe Biden wrote those laws.
Every major crime bill that's come out of this Congress has had the name Joe Biden on that bill.
We do everything but hang people for jaywalking in this bill.
Joe Biden's policies destroyed millions of black lives. Joe Biden may not remember, but we do.
But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black. Take a look at my record, man.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I marched with tens of thousands of others.
He had not actually marched during the civil rights movement and kept telling the story anyway.
I come out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff.
Now, his aides went back to say, look, he was in office marching for the idea.
That's not what the word marching means.
Twitter. I was not out marching.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
They're going to put you all back in chains.
And you ain't black. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. You ain't black. You ain't black. You ain't black. You ain't black.
The most racist thing a person could tell me is that I'm supposed to choose something based on my race.
You ain't black.
32-year-old liberal Democrat Joseph Biden of Delaware led the fight for the recent Senate anti-busing amendment, which was tacked on an appropriations bill.
Or the statement within the question you just asked, that we are going to integrate people so that they all have the same access and they learn to grow up with one another and all the rest, is a rejection of the whole movement of black pride, is a rejection of the entire black awareness concept, where
Black is beautiful, black culture should be studied, and a cultural awareness of the importance of their own identity, their own individuality. And I think that's a healthy, solid proposal.
Biden said, what it says is, in order for your child with curly black hair, brown eyes, and dark skin to be able to learn anything, he needs to sit next to my blonde-haired, blue-eyed son. That's racist. Who the hell do we think we are, that the only way a black man or woman can learn is if they rub shoulders with my white child? I oppose busing. It's an asinine concept, the utility of which has never been proven to me, he said. I've gotten to the point where I think our only recourse to eliminate busing may be a constitutional amendment. I don't feel responsible for the sins of my father and grandfather. I feel responsible for what the situation is today, for the sins of my own generation. And I'll be damned if I feel responsible to pay for what happened 300 years ago. An African-American child is sent to a white school in a wealthy neighborhood, then, back to the ghetto. How can he be encouraged to love his white brothers? He doesn't need to look at the other side. He needs the chance to get out of the ghetto permanently, Biden said. I do not buy the concept, popular in the 60s, which said, we have suppressed the black man for 300 years and the white man is now far ahead in the race for everything our society offers. In order to even the score, we must now give the black man a head start, or even hold the white man back, to even the race, Biden told a Delaware-based weekly newspaper in 1975. I don't buy that.
The American Negro, is that how you say it? The Negro in America. Come on, Joe.
I don't buy the concept popular in the 60s, which said we have suppressed the black man for 300 years, and the white man is now far ahead in the race for everything we offer in this society.
We decided we were going to change the world, and we did. We did. We finished the civil rights movement to the first stage.
Word.
I mean, you got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean.
We must make the streets safer. I don't care why someone is a malfactor in society. I don't care why someone is antisocial. We have an obligation to cordon them off from the rest of society, try to help them, try to change their behavior. That's why we do in this bill. We have drug treatment and we have other treatments to try to deal with it. But they are in jail. Away from my mother, your husband, our families. We would be absolutely stupid as a society if we didn't recognize the condition that nurtured those folks still exist. Evidence of that, the Democratic senator from Delaware.
Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, I'm ashamed that I voted for the 94 crime bill. You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. In fact, I drafted the bill.
Ooh. Now the 2020 campaign.
Joe Biden is almost certain to run for president in 2020.
Wait to see if Biden is going to get into this race, and if so, when?
As Joe Biden is about to announce.
Bring on Biden.
Dang it.
I haven't always been right. I know we haven't always gotten things right. Back in 2010, Barack and I finally reduced the disparity in sentencing, which we've been fighting to eliminate, in crack cocaine versus powder cocaine. It was a big mistake when it was made. We thought, we were told by the experts that crack, you never go back.
Goddamn pickaninny.
Joe Biden makes a great comeback in the Democratic nomination process in South Carolina because he gets an almost monolithic African-American vote. Do those African-American voters realize that Joe Biden is the father of the legislation that has incarcerated more black people for first-time nonviolent drug crimes than anybody in history? That the Biden bill, as he used to proudly call it, which mandated the absolutely mandatory harsh penalties for the first time nonviolent crime of possession of tiny amounts of drugs for personal use, is responsible for the mass incarceration at this point of millions of black people.
Another thing about how perspectives change over time. Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, I'm ashamed that I voted for the 94 crime bill. You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. In fact, I drafted the bill, if you remember.
I know that.
Who are trapped in our penal system with extraordinarily long sentences, which has destroyed lives, destroyed families, destroyed without any hope of rehabilitation. And if you're a conservative, it's costing taxpayers millions of dollars to house and feed and incarcerate people who are not a menace to society, people who are not inherently violent, people who haven't been convicted of a violent crime. Joe Biden, he's the father of this. He doesn't recant. He argued with a woman in New Hampshire about how successful this policy has been. The war on drugs was Richard Nixon's biggest single mistake. However, it's Bill Clinton and Joe Biden who turbocharged the war on drugs. Under Nixon, there were not mandatory penalties. A judge could take into consideration if the housewife who's caught with a small amount of marijuana in her purse but has to work a day and a night job to support 3 kids should get a different sentence than some gangbanger caught with a quarter ounce of cocaine. But today, a judge doesn't have that discretion, thanks to Joe Biden. Joe Biden, who started his career as an opponent of the desegregation of the Wilmington school system. That Joe Biden. Joe Biden, whose son, as Attorney General, refused to investigate the hangings of black men all over southern Delaware, saying that it wasn't racially motivated when the evidence is to the contrary. So people need to know Joe Biden. Joe Biden says, I've always been a great advocate for civil rights. Number one, he said he marched with Dr. King. That is a lie.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitude.
Well, more than once, advisors had gently reminded Mr. Biden of the problem with this formulation. He had not actually marched during the civil rights movement. And more than once, Mr. Biden assured them he understood and kept telling the story anyway. This is the guy who's going to restore dignity to the United States, ladies and gentlemen. The guy's a serial fucking liar.
Race baited throughout his career when it benefited him.
When I heard the Vice President of the United States, someone I grew up admiring, someone I've been on platforms with, when I heard him go to Danville, Virginia, and talk about politics in a way that no serious candidate ought to talk about it, when I heard him reach to the bottom of the deck and talk about one party putting people in chains, when I heard someone that I admired and have been on platforms with talk about ordinary conservative principles as being essentially racial viciousness, because that's the allegation he was making yesterday, I was disappointed by it, but I have to tell you, it brought back memories to me. It brought back memories of these Democratic politicians in the South who think they can go before black crowds and say one thing, that nobody else will hear it, and that they can somehow get a cheer in the room, and that they can blithely go on about their business. That's not the way you can do politics anymore because of the media, and I think Vice President Biden, I hope Vice President Biden learned an important lesson. You can't say one thing to a certain kind of people thinking nobody else is hearing you.